The ceiling bulb flickered when he stepped inside, the same hesitant pulse it had given the night everything stopped breathing. Dust bent the light, turning it amber, heavy, blurred. The carpet still held the indent where the stretcher wheels once pressed, a rectangular memory in faded fibers. Nothing moved, yet something remained, a quiet presence layered beneath still air. The city outside had changed, but here the clock had never resumed its rhythm. Detective Arlen Hayes inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic hush of a sealed room. He had not returned in 9 years. Now he was here again, called not by duty, but by the single photograph delivered to his desk in an unmarked envelope. Her name had been Mara Ellison, 26, archivist at the Seattle Historical Library. Bright hair the color of copper left near an open flame, analytical eyes, steady voice, the kind that made complex data feel like language rather than code. She had dedicated her short life to preserving records others forgot existed. Notes, census sheets, immigration rosters, albums that span decades. A gentle intelligence, never loud, never intrusive. She logged memories so that the rest of the city could remember its own timeline. Arlen moved through the room as if crossing a chapel floor, measured, careful. The wallpaper had yellowed, the faint floral vines now ghosts of what they once tried to portray: growth, softness, continuity. Objects remained in curated positions: a lamp, a notebook, a ceramic mug with a skyline etched in navy. He brushed a fingertip across the mug's rim, gathering an invisible layer of settled time. His breath formed the only sound, slow and purposeful, because the past deserved precision. The photograph lay on the table exactly where he had placed it that morning. 9 years had not altered the tremor in his hand when he first studied it. Black and white, grainy, printed on matte paper. A candid shot of Mara in the archival room at her library, labeled July 7, 1989 in faded ink. She sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacked boxes and folder binders, smiling slightly, the kind of unguarded expression she rarely gave. But behind her, half-shadowed, stood a figure, not fully visible, just a sleeve, a wrist, a watch with a distinctive square face. That watch was the reason Arlen had returned. It had belonged to him. Not a suspect then, just a colleague of hers. Elias Rowan, quiet, meticulous, attentive to every historical entry as though he was trying to rewrite his own. He had worked 2 floors above Mara, cataloging maritime photographs from the 1920s. Elias never spoke more than a sentence or two at a time. People described him as neutral, composed, almost soothingly silent. No one associated him with disruption of any kind. He simply belonged to the library's hush. Arlen sat, the wooden chair giving a soft creak. He opened the case file, a folder of beige edges and fatting tabs. Even the ink on the forms had softened, letters thinning like memory. In those first days of investigation, he had trusted data, forensics, procedure. But data had limits. It did not show the invisible threads between lives, or how one person could stand near another without leaving fingerprints yet still leave an imprint. He slid the file's contents outward: autopsy summary, witness statements, property inventory. He paused at the item list from Mara's apartment. Among the objects was a missing entry that had long bothered him: her field notebook. She carried it everywhere, filled with dates, exhibit codes, details from her archival hunts. It had never surfaced during the inquiry. Not in her office, not in her home, not in disposal records. One notebook, innocuous yet constant, the kind of item someone might remove not out of impulse but out of knowledge of what it contained. Arlen flipped through the folder with soft hands, as if the pages might rip under emotion alone. He recited the details silently. Time of discovery, no forced entry, no reaction from neighbors, nothing distinct except absence. Evidence without narrative, numbers without pulse. He stood, approached the window. The city skyline was sharper now. new towers reaching upward since 1989, yet the morning light fell the same way on the harbor. He imagined Mara walking through those streets with her satchel of documents, eyes absorbing details others missed. He wondered if she had sensed anything the final week, any shift in atmosphere, any presence that edged too close. A drawer remained sealed in the desk. He slid it open, wood scraping gently. Inside lay envelopes neatly tied with twine, personal letters, receipts, residency forms, a postcard of the Space Needle with sunlit clouds. He touched the twine knot, then paused. Something felt unfamiliar in its arrangement, not in what it tied, but in the tension of its bind. A knot tied by someone deliberate, someone who understood archival methods, yet did not belong to her handwriting rhythm. He untied it slowly. The letters smelled of faint lavender, a scent she was known for. One envelope, dated June 14, 1989, was addressed to Mara from Elias. A courteous tone, brief sentences. Appreciate your insight on the maritime ledger sequence. Your method continues to reveal order in places we assumed disorder. No personal warmth, no implication of closeness, merely professional admiration. Yet Arlen noticed something in the ink, pressure marks at the lower corners, as if the pen had been held too tightly. Control masking something unnamed. He set the letter down, returned to the photograph. The sleeve behind her, plain gray linen. The watch square, brushed steel, dark strap. Arlen had seen that watch on Elias during every interview. He had noted it casually, never with suspicion. Standardized, unremarkable. But in the photograph, its angle revealed a subtle difference. An engraving at the corner, initials ER, it was unmistakable. He replayed the interview transcripts in memory. Elias had been calm, his voice regulated. When asked where he had been on the day of Mara's final shift, he had responded with measured clarity. Catalog room B, entire afternoon. No interruptions. Yet no one had confirmed his presence that exact hour. The catalog room had no camera, only a sign-in sheet for staff access. His signature had been there, yes, but signatures could be placed after the fact if one had access to the undisturbed sheet. A faint hum entered the room, the building's old ventilation system. It stirred the dust at his feet. He felt a weight lift from the photograph as if it breathed. He lowered himself to the carpet, tracing its pattern like an archaeologist reading sediment. He closed his eyes briefly. The cold, clinical distance he had cultivated throughout his career slipped for a moment. Not grief, not sorrow, just acknowledgement. The past still held shape. He opened his eyes to the shadows near the bookshelf. A thin line of tape, long faded, remained on the floor boundary marker from the original scene. His memory located the exact evidence tag once placed there. A paper scrap torn from a notebook. It had been logged, examined, dismissed. No handwriting, no lead. Only fiber and pulp and nothing else. He stood again, returning to the desk. The file contained one detail he had never reconciled. On the night of the evidence collection, an officer had recorded seeing a binder on Mara's desk labeled Port Registry 1912, yet no such binder existed in her apartment photographs. The inventory listed maritime documents, but that specific binder was absent. Arlen had forgotten it, buried beneath procedure and years. He thought of Elias, cataloging maritime history, tracing vessels and crews, names that crossed oceans. Elias had once told a colleague, history is alignment. When entries misalign, truth is simply delayed. The colleague had repeated the remark during the investigation, but it had been noted as philosophical rather than factual. Arlen lifted the photograph again. He focused not on the watch nor the sleeve, but the object barely visible behind Mara resting on the floor, a binder with a torn spine. Zoomed mentally, recalled detail by detail, the binder the officer mentioned. It had been present then, vanished later. That binder might have contained cross-referenced ship routes from the Pacific border, something Mara had been researching for a new exhibit. If so, she might have discovered an inconsistency in the archival entry Elias curated. Not intentional wrongdoing, but an alteration in dates, crew lists, cargo documentation. A correction made by him, perhaps, to maintain a specific version of historical continuity. A correction she detected. If she had noted it in her missing notebook, then that notebook was key. And if the binder had vanished, someone removed it to protect alignment. He exhaled, long and controlled. Static stillness returned. He recorded his thoughts in quiet internal rhythm, each point a thread. Photograph Elias present. Binder missing. Notebook gone. Letter formal tense. He placed them side by side in his mind, not accusing, not assuming, only observing the logical arc. He whispered barely sound, "You were here." It was not accusation, only recognition. The room accepted the statement like dust accepts light. No recoil, only continuation. Arlen closed the folder, but it felt different now. Lighter not because the truth was clear, but because its outline existed. Even logic could not undo time, yet logic could reveal shape where silence once stood. He remained still for a minute, absorbing the room's quiet pulse. Justice, he realized, was a structure of process, but truth, especially in this room, was softer, almost humane. He reached for the photograph once more, holding it carefully, respectfully, as if it were more than paper. Something human remained in its grain. Morning settled into the room with a pale resolve, steady but muted. Arlen sat again, every movement careful, almost reverent. In the stillness, the apartment felt like a preserved chamber, neither haunted nor emptied, simply paused. His fingers rested against the folder edge, absorbing its quiet tension. He had avoided opening the second envelope for years. It sat in the back of the case box, sealed, stamped unconfirmed lead, hold. He remembered dismissing it not out of certainty, but exhaustion. Someone had mailed it anonymously 3 weeks after the case closed, claiming insight into Mara's research. At the time, the department classified it as peripheral noise. He slid it open. Inside was a photograph, older sepia, ships docked against a fogged harbor. On the back, a single line written in tidy pencil, cross-reference, July 7 catalog versus original manifest. No name, no signature, no flourish. He stared at it, the meaning too bare, too precise. The July 7 date was the same as the candid photograph in her archive room. The same afternoon Elias appeared behind her, just beyond the reach of interpretation. He placed the sepia print beside Mara's candid shot. 2 eras, 2 harbors linked only by date and catalog detail. Not a conspiracy, not manipulation. Just a quiet correction she must have found, one that contradicted Elias' restored entry. Archivists occasionally adjusted inconsistent logs, but adjustments had rules, chains of approval, signatures. Elias had bypassed them. Perhaps he considered the correction minor, harmless, but Mara logged discrepancies. Always. He could see her handwriting even now, sharp angles, deliberate spacing. If she had noticed the altered manifest, she would have annotated it in her notebook. The notebook Elias later could not locate, the notebook that vanished before Arlen arrived that original night. Not stolen in panic, but removed in knowledge. He inhaled the room's soft dust, not choking, just aware. It settled on memory like fine ash, nothing violent, just the residue of what ended too quietly. He shifted to the stack of apartment photographs taken that night. Seen evidence, lens still silent. He examined them in order, desk, bookshelf, floor marker, window, kitchen. Frame by frame, he searched for disruption present, something overlooked. Then he paused. Photo 11. The side table near the entryway. A faint indentation on the wood grain, half circle, narrow, exactly the size of a watch resting against it. Not confirmation, not proof, but alignment. Marks of pause, not struggle. Someone waiting, not intruding. He whispered almost thoughtfully, "You stood here." Not accusation, observation. The moment expanded, time arranging itself piece by piece. Quiet logic became shape, motive without emotional heat. Wrongdoing not born of anger but preservation. He sensed no malice in Elias' action, only a firm adherence to the version of history he curated, a history he believed improved, polished, corrected. Mara had not accused him, likely not even approached him. She might have intended to file a revision request, standard procedure. But procedure reveals, and revelation can fracture control when someone's identity is built on precision. Arlen rose again, his knees stiff, age pressing gently. He paced the perimeter, letting details lift from memory. Elias' posture in the interview, his steady gaze, his measured tone. No tremors, no defensiveness. Just stillness, as if he carried truth like architecture, solid, unobtrusive, necessary. He approached the doorframe. The paint had chipped further since his last visit. Time wears even silence. He reached out and touched the wood, feeling its grain, its small fractures. He imagined Mara moving through this doorway, folder under arm, unaware of any fracture approaching her methodical life. He blinked slowly, a recalibrated breath in his chest. From his coat, he removed a small digital magnifier, new technology, too late for the original case. He positioned the candid photograph beneath it, zeroing in on the linen sleeve. Under magnification, the linen revealed a thread pull near the cuff, frayed edge, uniquely textured. He remembered seeing that same fray during the interview, Elias fiddling with the cuff absent-mindedly when discussing maritime acquisitions. He had not recognized its relevance then. Now it was the seam of alignment. Arlen sat, wrote a note in sparse language. He avoided any speculation or emotional framing. Only. Photo confirms presence. Catalog revision link probable. Missing notebook remains key. He paused, pen hovering. The phrase "remains key" felt insufficient but accurate. He scanned the letters again, looking for smallness, details unassuming, overlooked, credible. One line in Elias' correspondence stood out now, brushed with new context. Order sustains memory. To Elias, order wasn't just methodology, it was identity. To have a correction exposed, even academically, risked unraveling more than an entry. Arlen closed his eyes, letting logic breathe. In the dark behind his eyelids, the room felt alive not with guilt, but with intersection. Two people aligned by history, then separated by its interpretation. He opened his eyes and reached for the binder list. The officer who noted its presence had retired, unreachable now. But the log existed. He read the line slowly, as if tasting it. Port Registry 1912. Observed on desk, not collected. He exhaled through his nose, controlled quiet. That gap had undone everything, yet undone nothing in public record. No scandal, no coverage, no second inquiry. Only absence carefully catalogued by time. A soft sound rose from the hallway, floorboard tension, nothing animate, just building shift. He did not turn. This space was memory, not haunting. He continued his review. The apartment blueprint suggested only one unlikely exit that would allow an unseen departure that night, the service stairwell behind the laundry room. Employees used it during renovations, a narrow route avoiding main sightlines. Elias would have known it. He had assisted in archival transfers during building repairs. Arlen approached the back hallway, footsteps muted, respectful. He opened the small door to the service stair. Air rushed out stale, closed, still. He descended 2 steps, listening. Metal, cold beneath his palm, echoed with before-time weight. He turned back. He did not need to leave the apartment. He only needed to accept that the route fit quietly without narrative flourish. He returned to the desk and sat, posture resigned not in defeat but in clarity. He placed the photograph, the sepia harbor, the letter, the binder note, and the indentation image side by side, aligned in neat investigative rhythm. No leaps, no dramatic reveal, just procedural truth accumulated. The twist was not hidden, not orchestrated, not cinematic. It was simple. An archivist corrected a record, another protected his version, and in the quiet clash of interpretation, permanence gave way to unintended consequence. He leaned back slightly, absorbing the apartment's pulse. A soft hum from the refrigerator motor, distant gull cries from the waterfront, faint city wheels turning. Life resumed elsewhere, but here it remained paused out of respect. He spoke fragmented, hesitant, just records, that's all it ever was. His voice held no accusation, only a thin thread of human recognition. Mara had not died for scandal, betrayal, or secret. She died because history mattered too much to both of them, each in their own method of preservation. Her truth was correction, his was continuity. Arlen closed the folder for the second time, more gently than the first. He had not solved a murder in dramatic sense. He had assembled a sequence of ordinary motives, quiet choices, archival tension. It felt almost anticlimactic, yet more devastating for its restraint. Justice, should it move now, would be bureaucratic, procedural, slow. But justice was not the point. Memory was. He stood, taking one last look at the photograph. Mara on the floor, surrounded by documents, smiling in that rare, unguarded way. Behind her, Elias, barely present, yet fully there. He whispered again, softer, "I'm sorry." Not to her, not to him, to time. He left the apartment without ceremony. The door latched behind him, gentle, decisive. On the street, rain began its quiet descent, misting pavement, not cleansing but acknowledging. The rain followed him home like a muted recording of the past, droplets steady, unaccented. Arlen sat at his desk hours later, the apartment folder open again, though he had promised himself he would let it rest. He had learned long ago that some cases end not when truth appears, but when the mind finally accepts stillness. He removed the watch list from an early interview log. Elias' accessories catalog, 3 pens, 1 linen handkerchief, 1 square-faced steel watch, all tagged, all routine. Yet one line stood out now, faint, almost shy. Watch engraving confirmed. ER at the time, that notation meant only identification. Now it labeled presence. He leaned back, letting the room darken without reaching for a lamp. Darkness helped evidence speak, not loudly, not thematically, but clearly. In darkness, patterns lose performance instinct. Facts settle. He replayed the single thing that had never left him, Mara's handwriting in the only surviving archive log from her final day. It contained a brief notation, margin scrawled in pencil, partially smudged. Check consistency, July manifest versus new entry revision. That was her voice more than any photograph could hold. Not confrontation, not suspicion, just precise curiosity. Curiosity can be disruptive in rooms built on quiet perfection. He stared at the line for a long time. It revealed no motive, no accusation, just alignment of date and discrepancy. A whisper rather than declaration. Across his desk, streetlight bled through blinds in thin segments, stripping the file with pale geometry. He followed the narrow band of light as if tracing a forensic map. His breath appeared steady but carried the weight of conclusion, logical, not emotional. His phone, old rotary model, sat silent. No call would be made tonight. He had no reason to notify anyone at this hour. The case would not erupt into pursuit, chase, confession. That belonged to other stories. Here, what remained was adjustment. He reopened his notebook, writing in controlled script. Case reconstructed through archival logic, not incident pattern. No forced break. Presence aligned with missing entries, not confrontation. Disappearance of binder and notebook deliberate, careful, silent. He paused, listening to the rain as if it were giving testimony, consistent, unembellished. It told nothing of motive, only timing. Arlen considered the implication of reopening the formal file. Elias was still in Seattle, retired early, consulted occasionally by museums needing historical continuity. He lived in a condominium overlooking the harbor, near the archival building where he had once felt invisible authority over narrative. Elias had never denied presence that day because no one had ever asked him to confirm it. In every interview, the question was never "Were you there?" but rather "What do you recall from your floor that afternoon?" He had answered honestly by omission. Room B, cataloging. Arlen understood now that Elias had never lied in the investigative sense. He had simply protected the structure of his version of history. To him, that structure might have felt more vital than any single entry, any single person. Preservation has its own quiet faith. He shut the file again, but not to bury it, simply to let it settle. He rose, crossing the living room to the cabinet where his unsolved folders rested. He placed Mara's case not among them, but on a separate shelf, neither closed nor open, merely resolved to factual proportion. He stood there unmoving, remembering the exact scent of her apartment, lavender and paper aging under soft heat. He had felt no fear there, no violence, only interruption. On his desk, the candid photograph remained. He returned to it, holding it carefully. Mara's smile was not posed. It reflected a moment of discovery, the kind archivists live for, a thread that clarifies, a record that connects. Behind her, Elias' sleeve stayed ghost-like, not threatening, just present. Presence, Arlen realized, is occasionally more decisive than action. He set the photograph down and opened a clean page in his notebook. He wrote only one sentence. She was not undone by cruelty, but by precision meeting precision. No flourish, no emotion, just the truth of two meticulous minds intersecting. He closed the notebook, extinguished the room's light, and sat in darkness a moment longer than necessary. Outside, the harbor fog drifted in low, cushioning city noise. Somewhere, archival lights glowed in night mode, custodians filing, dust motes floating between shelves of recorded memory. He imagined Elias, older now, moving through his apartment with the same deliberate steps. Perhaps he still polished that square watch, its engraving softened by time. Perhaps he did not think of Mara at all. Or perhaps he remembered her exactly as she was in that photograph, surrounded by what she loved, aligned with her purpose. Arlen rose again, not restless, just attentive. He approached his window, pushing it open an inch. Seattle air entered, damp, briny, familiar. He said nothing, because nothing remained to say. Justice would move slowly, if at all. Any inquiry he filed would be clerical, civil, understated. No court spectacle, no headline, only correction. He looked at the skyline, faint lights and mist. The city held its own archives, bridges replaced, buildings demolished, names erased. Yet here, in this one investigation, time refused erasure. It remained intact, quiet, incontrovertible. He returned to his desk only once more. He picked up the photograph, held it with a kind of human steadiness untouched by procedure. His thumb hovered over the grain, not pressing, not smudging. A breath long measured. He whispered not to Mara, not to Elias, not to the case. It mattered. No judgment, no closure, just acknowledgement. He slid the photograph into an archival sleeve, sealing it with careful precision. Then he filed it, not into evidence, not into cold case storage, but into personal ledger, beside only two other items he had kept across decades. A press clipping of a solved disappearance and the final message from a retired mentor who once told him, "Some truths don't restore balance. They simply refuse to disappear." He shut the cabinet. Silence shaped the room, natural, unforced. He sat one last time. The city's faint maritime horn sounded in distance, low, unornamented. A sound not of ending, but of existence. He closed his eyes, allowing the entire reconstruction, photograph, binder, notebook, indentation, engraving, to settle into place. No triumph, no revelation shock. Just the steady cadence of a truth discovered responsibly, almost respectfully. When he opened his eyes, dawn had begun tinting the edge of buildings, pale, unstated. He leaned back, breathing in the new light not as relief, but as continuation. Justice would be filed, history corrected, memory preserved. Yet something human remained, not hope, not grief, not even closure. Just a recognition that even in the quiet intersections where evidence and intention meet, life leaves its faint, unrewritten trace. He let the moment stand, unedited.